Hello viewers, in this video I will try to explain and I will also try to narrate an essay written by Alfred W. Crosby, and the title of the essay is Ecological Imperialism: The Overseas Migration of Western Europeans as a Biological Phenomenon. This essay is written by American professor of history, geography, and American studies Alfred W. Crosby. He was born in 1931 and died in 2018 on March 14. So he was known for his groundbreaking works on ecological imperialism and the Columbian Exchange. Through his research works, such as the Columbian Exchange, which was published in 1972, and America's Forgotten Pandemic, which was published in 1976, and Ecological Imperialism, published in 1986, Crosby has imparted biological as well as geographical interpretations for the question about European success in settling or Europeans' success in inhabiting in foreign lands. He had regarded the new European settlements in alien lands as Neo Europe, Neo Europes, especially of Australasia, South America, and North America. The theory, ecological imperialism, is propagated by Alfred Crosby. Before moving on to the essay, now let's try to know about the biographical detail of the writer. Alfred Worcester Crosby Jr., he was born to Ruth and Alfred Worcester Crosby Sr. in Boston, Massachusetts on January 15, 1931, and he grew up in Wellesley, Massachusetts, and graduated from Wellesley High School. In 1952, Crosby graduated from Harvard University with a degree in history and then entered the US Army in 1952 during the Korean War. Later, he had also spent 20 months stationed in the Panama Canal Zone in Latin America. After being discharged from the US Army in 1955, he had also obtained a master's degree in teaching from Harvard in 1956 and a doctorate degree in history from Boston University in 1961. Crosby was an interdisciplinary researcher who combined the fields of history, geography, biology, and medicine. Recognizing the majority of modern day wealth is located in Europe and the New Europes, Crosby had set out to investigate what historical causes are behind the disparity, investigating the biological factors that contributed to the success of Europeans in their quest to conquer the world. Apart from that, one of the important themes of his works was how epidemics affected the history of mankind, and as early as the 1970s he was able to comprehend the impact of the 1918 flu pandemic on world history. According to Hal Rothman, who was a professor of history at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, Crosby added biology to the process of human exploration, coming up with explanations for events as diverse as uh, Cortes' conquest of the Aztec Empire and the fall of the Inca Empire that made vital use of the physical essence of humanity. In 1972, he had created the term Columbian exchange in his book of the same name, and the term has become popular among historians and journalists. Other terms coined included Neo Europes and Virgin Soil Epidemic. Crosby was also interested in the history of science and technology. He wrote several books on this subject, dealing with the history of quantification, of projectile technology, and the history of the use of energy. He had said that the study of history also made him a researcher of the future. He was very much interested in how humankind could make the future a better one. Besides, he taught at Washington State University, where he was a co founder of the school's first Black Studies department, then Yale University, the Alexander Turnbull Library in New Zealand, and twice at the University of Helsinki as a Fulbright bicentennial professor, most recently in 1997 and 1998. He was also appointed an academician by French President Marty Ahtisaari, and he was retired from the chairman of Professor Emeritus of History, Geography, and American Studies of the University of Texas at Austin after teaching for 22 years in 1999. If you talk about his personal life, Crosby was interviewed by historian John Frederick Scholar, where he had discussed about his life and his research works. Crosby's hobbies includes bird watching and jazz, on which topic he could lecture with great expertise. He had also traveled with 36 students to Delano, California to assist in building a health center for the United Farm Workers. He had married to linguist Frances Cartoon. I'm sorry for the pronunciation. He was previously married to Anna Beineman and Barbara Stevens. His son Kevin and his daughter Caroline survived him, and he died at Nantucket Island of complications of Parkinson's disease. So that's all about a brief introduction about the writer's biography. Okay, now let's resume our uh, reading of this text of this essay. Ecological Imperialism, the overseas migration of Western European as biological phenomenon. So before moving on, I would like to mention one thing here. The word ecological imperialism, it means when a country uh, goes to another country to rule that country, means when a country tries to colonize another country in another continent, and in that process they also try to settle in those lands, they also try to exploit the environment of that land, then it will be called as ecological imperialism, but it is not limited to what I have said. Okay, so when this kind of thing happens, then the native people or the originals of that particular land, they will be utterly uh, influenced by it. When I say influence, they are more likely to be destroyed, they are more likely to be extirpated by the influence of foreign migrants. So there are all kinds of things the writer has tried to delineate through this essay from his research. So the theory, ecological imperialism, it is propagated by Alfred Crosby. According to Crosby, the European settlers were successful in the colonization of other regions owing to their accidental as well as deliberate introduction of animals, plants, and diseases, leading to major shifts in the ecology of the colonized areas, and the population also drastically decreased due to epidemics. So epidemic means a large number of means when a large number of people affected by a disease within a community. If I say endemic means it occurs regularly, or it occurs in a regular interval within an area or community. Okay. So when Europeans settlers, when they had gone to different continent, and upon reaching there they had also tried to make colony, and they have also created new settlements, and some of them have permanently settled in those new lands. Okay. So they were able to succeed in that task owing to their uh, accidental as well as deliberate introduction of animals, plants, and diseases. Means when they have gone to a new land, at that time they have also taken many plants, many animals with them, and they have introduced those animals and plants to that new land. And in that process they have also taken uh, unwittingly many diseases. Okay. And when they have taken those diseases were the reasons which created havoc among the native people, or among the original or indigenous people of that specific land. In that way, since those indigenous people, or those aboriginal or native people had never seen or experienced the diseases that is brought by the colonizers or the European settlers. That's why they could not confront this disease, and most of their uh, population, they could not survive. Consequently, most of the native people, they were died. In that way, the colonizers had got an opportunity to encroach those lands of the native people. In that way, they had succeeded in taking the lands of aboriginals in especially America, New Zealand, Australia, and in some cases Africa. And besides the countless pathogens means bacterium, virus, and microorganism. The countless pathogens carried by European migrants and settlers, it had detrimentally affected the native populations of North America, Australia, and Africa. In other words, the diseases brought by them were more lethal than the weaponry. So, as a matter of fact, the native people, or the aboriginals, or the indigenous people of Australia, New Zealand, and America, they they were died, means they died not because of European settlers or European colonizers weaponry power. They were died, or they left this planet owing to the diseases brought by the European settlers, unknowingly, or in some cases knowingly. Even the new diseases extirpated nearly 90% of aboriginal and indigenous community in some locations where the Europeans settled forever. So, in this way, in many places, Aboriginals and indigenous community, they were not able to stand before the European settlers owing to the diseases they brought. For example, if I take an example here, then in the beginning of 16th century, a Spanish uh, conquistador called Hernan Cortes, he was born in 1485 and died in 1547. He led an expedition to go to the New World. So New World is the present day Mexico. So New World is also called to the regions of America. Okay, and Old World is called to Old World is indicated to Asia, Europe, and Africa. Okay, and consequently, the communication and interaction between the Old World Spaniards and the New World Aztecs, it annihilated the Aztec Empire in merely 2 years. That is, in February 1519 they came, and by August 1529 the Aztec Empire was completely demolished. Means it, it was fallen. Okay, and why it occurred owing to the diseases carried by Europeans. Otherwise Aztec Empire would not have fallen. Moreover, it is believed that the arrival of smallpox in the empire by Europeans led its downfall in 1520s. The Europeans' more advanced weaponry, technology, and horses had negligible impact on Aztec, as they were also expert in horses, bloodhounds, gunpowder, and steel. So here we have got to know that the decline of Aztec Empire was not uh, due to the technological advancement of European colonial powers. It was owing to the pandemic. Pandemic means since European settlers had tried to conquer the Aztec Empire, uh, they have unknowingly also brought diseases. Okay, and uh, a group of colonists led by Captain John Smith. Captain John Smith, he was born in 1580 and died in 1631. He arrived in North America in 1607. Accordingly, that group of colonists, they created the Jamestown colony in Virginia, and upon their arrival, it was assumed that the colonists might not be able to confront and survive the brutal nature, climate, and atmosphere of the New World. New World means, I have already told you, Western Hemisphere of Earth, that is called America. But ironically, it was the aboriginals or the native people who could not survive the diseases brought by Old World, that is from Africa, Asia, and Europe. So here we have got one new thing, and that is in 1607, Captain John Smith, he was one of the European colonizers, and with his team, he arrived in North America in 1607. And when he arrived, it was assumed by the natives that they won't be able to survive here. Okay, but after some days of uh, staying, it was evident that actually they had been able to survive here. But on the other hand, the native people, they have not been able to survive. Why? The same reason, and that is diseases brought by them. And they have not only brought diseases, they have also brought uh, plants, domesticated animals, which they have tried to uh, rear here and which they have tried to uh, reuse here. Okay. And broadly speaking, the colonizers had brought along plants and animals diametrically new to the Americans, some by design and other by utter accident. So I have already talked about this thing that the European settlers or the colonizers, they had brought along plants and animals which is completely new, completely not known before to the Americans. And they have done this by some by design and some by utter accident. And they were enthusiastic and determined to farm in a European manner. So after coming to this new land in America or in Australia and in New Zealand too, the European settlers, they have not left their European manner of cultivation or agriculture. So they have tried to reuse those cultural or day to day lifestyle philosophy in the new land they have settled. Therefore, the colonists introduced their domesticated livestock like honeybees, pigs, horses, mules, sheep, and cattle. So they have also uh, introduced domesticated livestock like honeybees, pigs, horses, mules, sheep, and cattle in the new land they have settled. And apart from honeybees, pigs, horses, mules, sheep, and cattle, they had also domesticated plants such as wheat, barley, rye, oats, grasses, and grapevines. Okay, so in this process, they also unwittingly carried pathogens. Pathogens, I have told you, bacteria, microorganism like this, weeds and rats. So the advent of these alien species radically nettle the balance of native species, and it relentlessly hurts the life of indigenous population. So when you bring a new thing from another from a foreign land, and after bringing those new thing, if you try to uh, use those things in your own new land or in your own motherland, then you will see that those plants or those things, it has killed many other common plants or common things of your place. So the same thing happened in this context also. In addition, the first major smallpox outbreak among indigenous people between 1616 and 1619 in Massachusetts led their own doom. So here we can see that the two great pandemics which occurred in 1616 and 1619. So these two pandemics, it occurred in Massachusetts. So these two pandemics are two major smallpox outbreaks, and these outbreaks only occurred owing to the advent of or owing to the um, inception of European settlers. Okay, so here I would like to give one example, and That is, uh, since you all know about Assam, so in Assam, especially in the upper Assam, you will get tea, Assam tea, or uh, the Northeast tea, especially the Assam tea is known as Northeast tea. So Assam tea is famous in the entire world, as you all know. But this tea plantation process, it was done by the Britishers or the European colonizers. They have done this for their own commercial benefit, for their own uh, mm, for their own economic uh, advancement. Okay, and when the demand of Assam tea grew in Britain or in European places, then the Britishers or the colonizers, they have tried to plant more uh, tree 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 plantation in Assam, especially in the upper Assam region or area. So in that way, you will see that many forests were cleared. So when you try to clear the forest of a particular region, then in that process you are also killing many native plants, trees, and herbs of a particular place. And you are now replacing with one particular tree or one particular plant. In that way, you are killing uh, the the ecological balance of a particular geographical arena. So that is an example of ecological imperialism. Okay, and that ecological imperialism you will get in many places. Wherever the Europeans had gone, they did these kind of things. Okay, and right now, if you come to Upper Assam, you will get to know that in most of the places you will get only one thing, that is tea plantation. Okay, the native, indigenous, and original uh, trees, plants, those are gone now. Why? Due to the homogeneous tea plantation done by the colonizers for their own benefit. Though now the government is also getting money, but since it is done at that time, now we cannot reverse it. So that is the impact done by a particular colonizer. Okay. And the writer is saying the Native Americans had never seen and experienced a disease like this before, which ultimately decimated the entire settlements in nations such as the Abenaki, sorry for the pronunciation again, and Pawtucket and the Wampanoag. On the other hand, by blotting out or by killing the native Indians, smallpox endemic fueled the colonists helped themselves to utterly obtruded the land and resources previously owned by bellicose indigenous community. So here we have got one very interesting thing. Upon the arrival of colonizers, European settlers in a new world, that is America or New Zealand or Australia, in those places, when the European settlers, when they first came, at that time the indigenous or the original people, they have also tried to uh, confront them, and in the process of confrontation, and in the process of war and conflict, they have been infected by the disease carried by the European settlers. And in that process, many indigenous people were died. And when this kind of thing happened, at that time, the population also decreased. And when population is decreased, then what will happen? Then the power of indigenous people will go down, and that will be benefited by the European settlers or the colonizers. So the same thing happened in Australia, New Zealand, and for some extent Africa and America. Otherwise, in the places like Abenaki, the Pawtucket, and Wampanoag, the Europeans would have never survived. Okay, so if they would have never gone, if the Europeans have would have never gone in the places like Abenaki, Pawtucket, and Wampanoag, then today those places will be uh, filled up with the original or native people of their own kind. On the other hand, by blotting out the native Indians, smallpox endemic fueled the colonists helped themselves to utterly obtruded the land and resources previously owned by the bellicose indigenous community. Ergo, the European colonizers had no strong opposition in their mission of trespassing. Contrarily, diseases like syphilis was also a part of Old World, which was taken home by the European colonizers. So here, one more interesting thing, and that is, it is not that only the European settlers had brought the diseases. As a matter of fact, this new world, they had also some kind of diseases which were unfamiliar to the old world, and one of them was syphilis. Okay, syphilis, maybe it is related to a sexual disease, so this disease was also a part of uh, old world. Okay, and it was taken home by the European colonizers. However, due to colonialism, Europe had also witnessed massive surge in the demand of luxury fur, especially from Western Europeans. As a result, the value of fur it increased, and the fur trade expanded in North America. But it was detrimental for native people as they were forced to work with Europeans closely in the terrain and wildlife of America. On top of that, the commercialization of fur it had also opened a route for diseases to interchange, and the population of red fox and beaver increased. Subsequently, the fur trade damaged the ecological balance of North America. The widespread transfer of plants, animals, precious metals, commodities, culture, human populations, technology, diseases, and ideas between the New World and Old World, it created gigantic overhaul or the massive overhaul in the Old World. And it also began from Christopher Columbus's voyage in 942. Sorry, not 1942. It was wrong. It it should be differently written. Some kind of typo mistake is here. Okay, and later it was spearheaded by the European colonization and global trade. The Europeans, the European colonists and African slaves also replaced indigenous populations across the America. So here I don't have to explain. The line itself is clear. It is important to note that the numbers of Africans taken to the New World was far greater than the number of Europeans moving to the New World in the first 3 centuries after Columbus. The New World native plants like maize, tomato, potato, vanilla, para rubber tea, cacao, tobacco were interchanged with Old World native plants like citrus, apple, banana, mango, interchange mango, onion, coffee, wheat, and rice. So there were some plants, some livestock, and some things only familiar to the new world, and the same case can be applied for the old world too. But after the uh, European colonizers' arrival, these things were no more exclusive to one place. So these unfamiliar things became familiar for both the new world and the old world. And right now too, in our India, we eat potato in our meal, right? So this potato, tomato, it is brought by the colonizers, but now it has become uh, our own. But the reality is, it is brought by them. Okay, so this is also a kind of uh, European product. The same case can be seen in the uh, America, like rice. Rice was not found in America, but after the European settlements, this rice was also popular there, and they also grew it. And with the passage of time, the new context among the world population, it resulted in the interchange of a wide variety of crops and livestock, which supported increases in food production and population of the old world. Similarly, the American crops such as maize, potatoes, tomatoes, tobacco, cassava, sweet potatoes, and chili peppers became significant and inevitable crops around the globe. Likewise, rice, wheat, sugarcane, and livestock, among other crops, became inseparable part of the New World. Even the American produced metal silver, which flooded the world, and it became the hallmark metal used in coinage, especially in Imperial China. So this kind of thing also occurred due to uh, European settlers' at, arrival on different new worlds. And in the essay, Ecological Imperialism, the Overseas Migration of Western Europeans as a Biological Phenomena, Alfred D. Crosby, he critiques about Europeans in North America. He gives an instance of Vladimir Nabokov, and he argues that Vladimir Nabokov, he was a prime example of the most visible kind, the Homo sapiens of European origin. And he further says that Europeans and their descendants, who comprise the majority of human beings in North America, as well as in number of other lands outside of Europe, are the most spectacularly successful overseas migrants of all time. Besides, the author also expounds that it is totally strange to find Englishmen, Germans, Frenchmen, Italians, and Spaniards comfortably and ensconced, settled in places with names like Wollongong in Australia, Rotorua in New Zealand, and Saskatoon in Canada. So the pronunciation may excuse, where other people should dominate as they must have at one time. Crosby had mentioned that none of the major genetic groupings of humankind is as oddly distributed about the world as European. So you will get European people in Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, and in USA. So this is not uh, according to nature, according to the writer. Okay, and uh, the writer is saying that none of the major genetic groupings of humankind is as oddly distributed about the world as European, especially Western European whites. Almost all the people we call Mongolian people or Mongoloids, they live in the single contiguous landmass of Asia. Besides, black Africans are divided between three continents, their homeland and North and South Africa, but most of them are concentrated in their original latitudes, means in their own rooms, places. According to the writer, European whites were all recently concentrated in Europe, but in the last few centuries they have burst out as energetically as if from a burning building, and have created vast settlements of their kind in the temperate zone and north temperate zone, accepting Asia, a continent already thoroughly and irreversibly tenanted. So the European settlers or the European colonizers, they were able to succeed in cool places, but they failed to succeed in um hot places. Means their settlement you will get in cool places, but their settlement is scarce in hot places. And in Canada and United States together, they amount to nearly 90% of the population. And in Argentina and Uruguay together to over 95%, in Australia to 98%, and in New Zealand to 90%. So the only nations in the temperate zone outside of Asia which do not have enormous majorities of European white are Chile, with a population of two-thirds mixed Spanish and Indian stock, and South Africa, where blacks outnumber whites 6 to 1. So that is the population ratio here. Crosby states that the tropical zone, the Europeans failed to succeed, but in the temperate zone, their settlement it grew. The author also comments that the settlement in temperate zone by European colonizers as the lens of the demographic takeover. The reason for the relative failure of the European demographic takeover in the tropics are clear, and in tropical Africa, until recently, drops of fevers in tropical America, they died almost as fast of the same diseases, plus a few Native American additions. Furthermore, in neither region did European agricultural techniques, crops, nor animals prosper. Europeans did try to found colonies for settlement rather than merely exploitation, but they failed or achieved only partial success in the hot lands. In cooler lands, the colonies of demographic takeover, Europeans achieved very rapid population growth by means of immigration, by increased lifespan, and by maintaining very high birth rates. Through the essay, the author has also depicted the overseas migration of Western Europeans as a biological phenomenon. So, the four categories of organisms deeply involved in European expansion can be uh, found in this way. Number one is human being. Number second is animals closely associated with human beings, both the desirable animals like horses and cattle, and undesirable vermins like rats and mice. And number third, pathogens or microorganisms that cause disease in humans. And fourth, weeds. So these are the four factors which were deeply involved in European expansion. Okay, without these factors, they would not have been able to do what they uh, have succeeded to do. In stark contrast, very few aborigines of the Americas, Australia, or New Zealand, they ever went to Europe. So you will not see that. Those who did often died not long after arrival. The flow of human migration was almost entirely from Europe to her colonies and not vice versa, is not startling or very enlightening. European control overseas migration, and Europe needed to export, not import and labor. But this pattern of one-way migration is significant in that it reappears in other connections. The vast expanses of forests, savannas, and steppes in the land of demographic takeover were inundated by animals from the Old World, chiefly from Europe. Horses, cattle, goats, and pigs have for hundreds of years been among the most numerous of the quadrupeds of these lands, which were completely lacking in this species at the time of first contact with the Europeans. And in the lands of demographic takeover, the European pioneers were accompanied and often preceded by their domesticated animals, walking sources of food, leather, fiber, power, and wealth. And these animals often adapted more rapidly to the new surroundings and reproduced much more rapidly than their masters. And even the honeybee is the one insect of worldwide importance which human beings have domesticated. The Europeans had taken the honeybee, a kind of sweet and short-tempered servant, to every colony they ever established. And the native Indians of America, they looked upon on honeybee with an evil eye, and they considered their progress into the interior of the continent as an omen of white man's approach. Thus, as they discovered the beast, the news of the event passing from mouth to mouth spread sadness and consternation on all sides. Moreover, domesticated creatures that travel from the lands of demographic takeover to Europe are few. Australian Aborigines and New Zealand Maoris, they had a few tame dogs, unimpressive by old world standards and unwanted by the whites. Then Europe happily accepted the American Indians. Again, the explanation is simple. Europeans who controlled the passage of large animals across the oceans had no need to reverse the process. Broadly speaking, the pathogens, those pathogens that were transmitted by the Europeans, unlike the European themselves or most of their domesticated animals, did at least as well in the tropics as in the temperate lands of the demographic takeover. Epidemics devastated Mexico, Peru, Brazil, Hawaii, and Tahiti soon after the Europeans made the first contact with Aboriginal populations. The first strike force of the white immigrants to the lands of the demographic takeover was epidemic. A few examples from scores of possible examples follow. Smallpox first arrived in the Rio de la Plata region in 1558 or 1516 and killed, according to one chronicler possibly more interested in effect than accuracy, more than 100,000 Indians of the heavy riverine population there. An epidemic of plague or typhus, it decimated the Indians of the New England, caused immediately before the founding of Plymouth. And smallpox or something similar to it, it struck the aborigines of Australia's Botany Bay in 1789, and it killed half and rolled on into the inferior. And some unidentified disease or diseases, it spread through the Maori tribes of North Island of New Zealand in the 1790s, which killed so many in number of villages that the survivors were not able to bury the dead. So that's it. I have tried to give you some explanation and some reading through this novel. Through this video, and I hope you will get a we insight through my video. And I'm sorry for the pronunciation, since English is not my native language. That's why I have some issue with it. And thank you so much for watching it.